Question 15. Don't you think that these texts are examples of temporary compromise with the patriarchal status quo? While the main thrust of Scripture is toward the leveling of gender-based role differences, we recognize that Scripture sometimes regulates undesirable relationships without condoning them as permanent ideals. For example, Jesus said to the Pharisees, "Because of your hardness of heart Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so." Matthew chapter 19, verse 8. Another example is the regulation of how Christian slaves were to relate to their masters. Even though Paul longed for every slave to be received by his master, no longer as a bondservant but more than a bondservant, as a beloved brother, Philemon. Verse 16. But we do not put the loving headship of husbands or the godly eldership of men in the same category with divorce or slavery. The reason we don't is threefold. 1. Male and female personhood, with some corresponding role distinctions, is rooted in God's act of creation. Genesis chapter 1 and 2. Before the sinful distortions of the status quo were established. Genesis chapter 3. This argument is the same one we believe that evangelical feminists would use to defend heterosexual marriage against the increasingly prevalent argument that the leveling thrust of the Bible leads properly to homosexual alliances. They would say, no, because the leveling thrust of the Bible is not meant to dismantle the created order of nature. That is our fundamental argument as well. 2. The redemptive thrust of the Bible does not aim at abolishing headship and submission, but at restoring them to their original purposes in the created order. 3. The Bible contains no indictments of loving headship and gives no encouragement to forsake it. Therefore, it is wrong to portray the Bible as overwhelmingly egalitarian with a few contextually relativized patriarchal texts. The contra-headship thrust of Scripture simply does not exist. It seems to exist only when Scripture's aim to redeem headship and submission is portrayed as undermining them. See question 50 for an example of this hermeneutical flaw.